Have you ever been written off by people who swore your story was over? Have you felt the sting of whispers declaring that your best days were behind you, that nothing more could come from your life? Have you carried the weight of silence, knowing no one clapped, no one thanked you, yet you still pressed on? Let me tell you this, chosen one, God saw every unseen sacrifice, every quiet victory, every battle you won in secret. The world might have labeled you as done, but heaven never closed your chapter. When you stood in the fire and chose peace over retaliation, God was writing your testimony. When you poured kindness out of an empty cup, He was storing blessings in your future. When you walked through nights of doubt and still rose to face another day, He was proving that your resilience was not in vain. You were never forgotten, never abandoned, never dismissed in the courts of heaven. And now, the tables are turning. The same mouths that mocked you will be forced to witness the manifestation of God's hand on your life. The very people who said you were finished will become the audience to your comeback. You, God's chosen one, are stepping into a season where His power will vindicate you publicly, where His favor will crown you openly, and where His glory will silence every critic. If you believe this is your confirmation, comment 777 below. It's a prophetic signal that you align with heaven's timing. And before we dive deeper, let me pause to give heartfelt thanks to those who've supported me through. Super thanks. Your love and generosity mean more than words, whether you've given or not. Your presence here is a blessing, and I honor you deeply. Stay with me, because what comes next will uncover exactly how God is proving every doubter wrong and why your story is about to shift in ways you never imagined. Are you ready? Let's step into the revelation. God's chosen ones. They said you were done. Now God's proving them all wrong. The delays in your journey were never denial, no matter how loudly the world tried to label them that way. The seasons of pruning were not cruel punishments carved against your destiny. They were divine preparations, carefully designed like an architect shaping the foundation of a cathedral meant to stand for centuries. And every preparation carries with it an unveiling, a sacred unveiling that is beginning now in your life. For so long, others misread your silence and your hiddenness. They assumed that absence of applause meant absence of purpose. But hasn't history shown us repeatedly that what men dismiss as silence, God often uses as the womb of greatness? Psalm 27:14 whispers with unshakable truth. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Waiting was never wasting, it was building strength. They thought your hidden chapter was abandonment. But in truth, it was the concealment of a seed underground. Doesn't a seed first break in the darkness before it rises into the light? The same people who doubted you, who assumed your quiet seasons meant you were finished, are about to be stunned by what unfolds next. Because what is coming over your life does not read like failure, it reads like favor. The very storms that others celebrated as your downfall will now be unveiled as your setup for elevation. The roadblocks you faced, the locked doors that made you weep, are preparing to swing wide. Not because of human manipulation, but because you were forged ready. As Isaiah 22:22 declares, I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. But did he himself, a cuppin, But ask yourself at this moment, could it be that the rejection you once cried over was actually redirection toward your true throne? The truth is, you are not stepping into this chapter because you finally performed well enough or fit into their measures. You are stepping into it because you remained true. You refused to surrender your soul in exchange for temporary applause. You refused to blend into a culture of compromise. You would not hand over your peace simply to belong. Nor would you dim your light just to keep relationships that could not withstand its brightness. And is that not the very echo of Daniel in Babylon, who would not bow to false idols, and in the fire discovered the presence of God walking with him, as Daniel 3:25 records, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Muster, the great Italian painter Caravaggio, once said through his art that light becomes most powerful when it pierces through shadow. In his masterpiece, The Calling of St. Matthew, the beam of light across the tax collector's face symbolized divine interruption. Isn't that your life too, when darkness surrounded you? The light of God marked you. And what of your own interruptions? Were they not divine beams piercing into your plans, preparing you for a calling you never expected? And if your soul still wonders whether you have been abandoned, listen again to the hymn, "Be Thou My Vision." Composed in the ancient Celtic tradition, "Be Thou my vision. O Lord of my heart, naught be all else to me, save that Thou art." These words echo across centuries, reminding the chosen that their worth was never in human applause, but in the vision of God alone. Yet, how often did your enemies mock your silence? They resembled Herod Agrippa, the ruler who lifted himself against the church in Acts 12, only to be struck down by God. Acts 12:23 recounts with chilling precision. Immediately, an angel of the Lord struck him down, because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and breathed his last. Their arrogance became their ruin. Doesn't this warn us that those who mock the chosen are building their own collapse? In contrast, think of the ordinary baker Rosa Alvarez from Madrid, who once said after losing her entire business in an economic crash, "The silence of my ovens was the voice of my future." Years later, she rose again, founding a chain of bakeries that became a hub for community restoration. Doesn't her testimony reflect yours? What felt like emptiness was really groundwork. Nature itself testifies this truth. The bamboo tree spends years hidden beneath the earth, sending roots deep into unseen places. But once it breaks the surface, it shoots upward in weeks, towering higher than other plants. Was your hiddenness not the same, a deep rooting before a swift elevation? Science affirms it as well. In physics, resonance occurs when an object vibrates at its natural frequency, producing amplification. Could it be that your silence was God aligning your frequency with heaven's vibration, so that when the time came, your voice would echo with unstoppable power? The pruning, the waiting, the unseen battles, none of it was wasted. All of it was preparation for divine amplification. Now the unveiling begins. What once looked like ashes will shine like diamonds. What once sounded like silence will resound like a symphony. And what once felt like chains will be revealed as training weights that have only strengthened you for your appointed hour. Psalm 106 Fem affirms it. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. So rise, chosen one. This is not the season to shrink back. This is the hour to stand taller than the accusations, stronger than the betrayals, and louder than the whispers of doubt. The unveiling has begun. and no voice of man can silence the favor of God written over your life. When you wrestled with doubt, when your own reflection whispered that you were not enough, God never flinched in his certainty about you. He always knew what he had placed inside you, a vision sharper than the eyes of those around you, a heart stretched wider in compassion, and a spirit resilient enough to rise when others would collapse into the dust. Isn't it striking that what you thought was a weakness was actually a training ground? In Psalm 139:14, it is written, "I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, my soul knows it very well." Every tear, every silence, every midnight wrestle was not wasted. It was chiseling you into the person you now carry into the light. In the stillness, you cultivated strength, not the noisy kind that boasts, but the kind that endures like mountain stone, unmoved by storms. Can you feel how that quiet force is now beginning to echo louder than the trials that once sought to silence you? It will not only appear in visible blessings, but it will radiate from your very presence. People will sense it without words. An unspoken authority that carries weight beyond logic. Is this not the kind of weight Paul described in 2 Corinthians 4:17? For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Nature gives us its own mirror of this mystery. The pearl, hidden within an oyster, is birthed not from comfort but from irritation. Layer upon layer formed until beauty is revealed. Has your suffering not worked the same, shaping you into a treasure that now carries divine brilliance? And what of the desert cactus, storing unseen water while scorched by the sun, only to bloom with unexpected flowers in seasons of barrenness? Wasn't your soul prepared in similar secrecy? And here is the paradox that baffles those watching you. You survived storms without becoming the storm. You endured betrayal without turning bitter. Just as Joseph in Genesis 50:20 told his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today." Your trials did not sculpt you into what tried to destroy you. They unveiled the opposite. They released life, resilience, and unexplainable favor. But pause and ask yourself, why do people feel your presence before they hear your words? Why is it that rooms shift, conversations tremble, and atmospheres bend when you enter? Could it be that you now carry the resonance of heaven, the frequency of one who has walked through fire and come out with holy fragrance, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3:27, when they emerged from the furnace? The fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed. Their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. That same inexplicable preservation surrounds you. History warns us through its villains that those who mock such resilience meet ruin. Napoleon Bonaparte, who once crowned himself emperor with arrogance, declared Europe was his possession. Yet his empire crumbled at Waterloo, leaving him exiled and broken. Isn't that a sign that no power built on pride can withstand divine sovereignty? The arrogance of man is always measured against the endurance of the chosen. And in the end, heaven always has the final word. And what if the beauty of this truth is that you don't need to defend it? King David did not plead for approval when Saul chased him. He simply trusted God's hand. As Psalm 23:5 declares, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." That same overflowing oil is resting upon you, requiring no explanation. only recognition. So rise now, chosen one. Do not shrink back into doubt. Let the storms that once sought to bury you testify of the weight you now carry. Walk with an unshakable presence, for your life is no longer defined by trials, but by triumph. This is not the hour to explain, it is the hour to embody. The unveiling has begun, and you are the living proof. You no longer need to parade your wounds before the world as proof of your strength. The depth of your resilience does not rest on rehearsed stories of pain, nor on recounting every bruise or betrayal. God saw it all. Isn't that enough? Psalm 56:8 reminds us tenderly. You have kept count of my tossings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Your scars are not for spectacle, they are sacred inscriptions known to heaven. This season is not about merely surviving anymore, it is about divine recognition. But is it recognition from fickle human applause, which vanishes the moment distraction calls? Or is it the kind of recognition that thunders from heaven and reverberates through your very being? Every scar that once burned is now transformed into a seal of authenticity, and every quiet moment where you chose faith over fear has been etched into eternity. Recognition from God cannot be revoked by human lips. It carries the weight of everlasting honor. There is a recognition that declares, "This one never quit. This one carried integrity when shadows whispered compromise. This one is worthy of honor in the open because they were faithful in the hidden places." Luke 12:3 affirms this reality. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. You now stand at the threshold of a season that looks nothing like the wilderness you just crossed. Doesn't it stir your soul to realize that peace will no longer be a battle you wage daily, but a river flowing without resistance? And what is more, this peace is not fragile or temporary, it is the kind that carries permanence. Rooted in God's promise, it will guard your heart like walls of a fortress, unshaken by storms or shifting opinions. The very atmosphere around you will begin to testify of this new reality. Nature whispers this same truth. The glacier, moving in silence for centuries, reshapes entire landscapes without announcing itself. Have your hidden years not done the same, quietly carving valleys and forming mountains of strength within your spirit? And what of the night-blooming jasmine, unseen through the day, releasing its fragrance only when the darkness deepens? Were your trials not the night season in which your true fragrance was released? The slow patience of glaciers and the secret bloom of jasmine remind us that the greatest transformations are not instant, but inevitable. Isn't your journey the same? What was unseen by many has been relentlessly working, so that when the unveiling comes, it cannot be denied. Like creation itself, your life has followed divine rhythms no critic could interrupt. The testimony of the faithful rings across time. Job, sitting in ashes, refused to curse God, though he lost all. And in Job 42:10 it says, "And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job, when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before." If Job's ashes became the soil of restoration, then surely your silence is becoming the stage for recognition. Isn't it astonishing that heaven has always chosen to write its greatest stories on the canvas of suffering? Job's pain became a platform for double honor. Just as your struggles are now transforming into proof that divine restoration outweighs earthly loss. What once looked like ruin was, in fact, the scaffolding of glory, slowly being built in your favor. Even psychology tells us that the mind holds implicit memory, unspoken, unshared experiences that shape resilience. Could it be that your unspoken story, though unseen by others, has been encoded into your spiritual DNA, preparing you for influence you don't yet see. Just as in architecture, the unseen foundation bears the weight of the entire cathedral. Your hidden integrity now bears the weight of what heaven is building upon your life. When the structure is finally revealed, no one marvels at the foundation, yet it is the foundation that holds the glory aloft. So too, your hidden sacrifices, silent prayers, and private obedience are holding up a destiny that will astonish many. Isn't it powerful to realize that what seemed invisible was the very strength that ensured you would never collapse? But notice how history deals with those who sought recognition through deception. An infamous figure like Charles Ponzi, remembered for his fraudulent schemes, achieved fleeting attention, but his legacy became synonymous with collapse. Isn't that a clear warning? Recognition gained through dishonor dissolves into disgrace, but recognition born of faithfulness grows into eternal honor. Ponzi's empire of lies fell apart like a structure built on sand, echoing Matthew 7:27, and the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Doesn't this confirm that every false pedestal crumbles, while truth remains standing? You have chosen truth, and truth will now lift you where deception once tried to bury you. And how powerful is it that even ordinary lives mirror this truth? Maria Torres, a seamstress from São Paulo, once worked for decades in silence, mending clothes that others threw away. When asked why she never quit, she said, "Because every stitch is proof that broken things can still hold together." Years later, her small shop became a shelter for struggling women, offering them dignity through work. Isn't her story evidence that hidden integrity births public restoration? Her hands stitched more than fabric. They stitched together futures, identities, and hope. Doesn't her story mirror your own, where what seemed insignificant in silence is now being magnified in ways far beyond expectation? Scripture affirms the finality of this shift. Revelation 3:8 declares, "I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name." Doors are opening because you hold on in hidden places, and with each door, recognition flows not from human validation, but from heaven's decree. These doors will not merely be entrances to opportunity, but gateways into destiny rooms designed only for you, prepared long before time began. Doesn't it move your soul to realize that no human hand can shut what God Himself has opened? So, reason now. You have been faithful in silence, and heaven has announced your unveiling. The season of clawing for peace is ending. Peace will now flow like a river around your feet. You will no longer chase recognition, it will chase you. You will no longer need to defend your scars, they will shine as your crown. This is the hour to walk forward, chosen one, for the world is about to witness what heaven has already known all along. And when you walk, walk not with hesitation, but with the authority of one whose name is written in the book of life, whose light can no longer be hidden. This is not a season where doors creak halfway, teasing you with false promises of opportunity. This is the season where doors swing wide with authority, where the hinges of heaven move without resistance. Revelation 3:7 declares, "What He opens no one can shut, and what He shuts no one can open." Doesn't it strike you with awe that the very doors which once refused you now bow to God's decree? It is not chance, not coincidence. but divine endorsement. This is also a season where love is not a commodity you must beg for or chase down desperately. It flows toward you because the Father himself has stamped you as worthy. And is there any recognition more secure than God's own signature written over your life? Perhaps ease feels foreign after years of clawing for survival. Perhaps joy seems strange on a tongue that grew used to tasting only endurance. But does not Isaiah 61:3 promise to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair? The strangeness of joy is not weakness, it is proof of transformation. You are moving from the architecture of survival to the cathedral of thriving, where the foundation is peace and the windows are cut from grace. Isn't it staggering that after seasons of drought, the rain of joy feels almost unrecognizable? Yet it is the very rain your roots have been waiting for. Think of how nature tells the same story. The river, after years of carving stone in silence, suddenly creates valleys that host life. Or the cicada, buried underground for years, emerging to sing in an uncontainable chorus. Has your hiddenness not been the same, a slow preparation that now bursts into sound and freedom? Psalm 30:5 confirms this mystery. Weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. What if your morning has already begun, and the melody of your life is shifting from lament to praise? The testimonies of the faithful remind us this shift is not fantasy, but reality. Hannah, once mocked for her barrenness, found her voice in prayer and was honored by God with Samuel, a prophet to nations. 1 Samuel 1:20 records. So, in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." Just as Hannah's season shifted from begging tears to overflowing joy, isn't it possible that your barren years are now turning into the womb of promise? And how striking is it that art has captured this same divine reversal. In Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy rises after movements of tension and struggle. The symphony does not deny the darkness, it transforms it into triumph. Isn't your life echoing that same pattern, where the notes of pain are reorchestrated into a harmony of joy? What once felt like endurance alone now becomes the anthem of victory. Even the stories of ordinary lives bear witness. A farmer named Elias Duarte from rural Mexico once told his children after years of drought, "The rain doesn't delay, it prepares the soil." When the rain finally came, his fields bloomed beyond measure, and the harvest fed not only his family, but his entire village. Isn't that what your story proclaims, that what felt like endless waiting was actually preparation for abundance that will bless more than just you? But history also warns us about those who despised such seasons. King Belshazzar, feasting arrogantly in Daniel 5, treated holy vessels with contempt. Yet the writing on the wall declared his kingdom finished. And that very night it fell. Daniel 5:26 declared, "You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting." Doesn't that reveal the contrast? While prideful hearts collapse under judgment, the chosen who endured in humility rise into honor. So, rise now. Step into this new season without apology, without hesitation. Do not fear the strangeness of joy. Do not question the flow of peace, for it is heaven's confirmation over your endurance. The doors are not half open, they are wide, and they are yours to walk through. Love is not rationed, it is freely given. Stamped by God himself. Stand tall, chosen one, for what felt foreign yesterday will feel natural tomorrow. You are not merely surviving anymore, you are reigning in the season designed for you. It feels new because it is new, not because days fell from a calendar, but because alignment has finally caught up with identity. For so long, you bent yourself into shapes that made others comfortable, dimming your brilliance so their insecurities would not tremble. But you reached the breaking point where you could no longer betray your own soul. You decided that your essence was worth protecting, even if that meant walking in solitude for a season. Doesn't John 12:24 remind us of this truth? Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. What seemed like loneliness was not punishment but planting. And heaven is now answering that hidden sacrifice with a harvest no hand can hinder. What you are stepping into now is not hidden labor anymore, it is revelation. It is the hour when the roots you cultivated in silence begin to speak louder than applause. Isn't there a profound difference between someone who glitters only because a spotlight has been cast upon them and someone who carries their own radiance, forged in the fire of obscurity? Proverbs 18:16 declares, "A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great." Gifts tested in silence are now demanding recognition in the open. What you nurtured in secret is about to roar into public view, carrying a weight that stage lights cannot manufacture. Nature affirms this divine process. The oak tree does not rush its growth. It sends roots deep underground before stretching its arms toward the sky. And the caterpillar, hidden within its cocoon, dissolves into nothing before wings form for flight. Isn't that what your hidden years have been, an incubation for wings you did not know you carried? Isaiah 40:31 resounds here, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Waiting did not weaken you, it equipped you for flight. But notice the tragedy of those who clung to false comfort and never embraced transformation. Queen Jezebel, intoxicated by power and manipulation, sought to destroy prophets and silence truth. Yet her end was shameful. As 2 Kings 9:33 recounts, they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled on her. Isn't this a sobering contrast? While those anchored in deceit collapse, the chosen who dared to protect their soul rise into eternal honor. Even the arts echo this same awakening. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, the poet writes, "Long is the way, and hard, that out of hell leads up to light." What if your journey has been exactly that, a long, grueling road where each step carried you further from captivity into liberty? Milton's words capture the essence of your transformation. The path may have been severe, but it was leading upward all along. And how much more compelling when ordinary lives bear this witness. Sophia Ramos, a nurse from Lisbon, once said, after years of night shifts and unseen sacrifices, "The silence of service becomes the language of strength." Years later, her story was recognized publicly when her small clinic became the center of community healing. Isn't her testimony proof that heaven always honors hidden labor? Doesn't her story remind you that what you did in silence is now about to speak with undeniable force? My friend, this is the unveiling. Heaven's alignment has collided with your true identity, and no amount of delay can suppress what is rising. The season of smallness is over. The season of dimmed light is finished. The very courage you displayed in protecting your soul has summoned a response from heaven itself. So rise, chosen one. Step boldly into the new. For you are no longer hidden, you are heralded. The world must now reckon with what heaven already affirmed. There are those who shine because a spotlight has been cast upon them. And then there are those whose light could not be dimmed, even in the deepest shadows. You, the chosen one, belong to the second. This is why your presence will soon feel undeniable, because it carries an authority that was not manufactured by men, but forged in the unseen. Doesn't Matthew Cinch, Pais Prezice declare? You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. The brilliance that you carry now is not situational, it is essential. And no shadow has the power to smother it. And the more the world tried to cover you, the brighter that hidden flame grew, until it reached the point of bursting forth with unstoppable radiance. What once felt like obscurity was actually God's way of amplifying your glow in silence before revealing it to nations. People will not always be able to explain it, but they will feel it. They will feel the weight of endurance that didn't collapse under pressure. Like a bridge built with hidden reinforcements strong enough to bear storms for centuries. They will sense the purity of decisions that cost you everything but never corroded your soul. They will encounter the clarity of someone who no longer needs external validation to prove eternal value. Isn't this what Galatians 6-9 assures us? Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap. If we do not give up, you did not give up. And now the harvest is unavoidable. And isn't that why your presence now carries such gravity? Because every step you walk tells a story of trials overcome and integrity preserved. People may not know the full details, but they will sense that your life carries substance, not spectacle. Nature bears witness to this kind of weight. The sequoia tree rises to impossible heights because its roots intertwine with others underground, silently strengthening each other against every storm. Haven't your hidden connections with heaven anchored you the same way? And what of the lion, silent as it waits in tall grass, only to move with decisive force when the moment arrives? Hasn't your silence carried that same potency, waiting until heaven's timing aligned? Isaiah 60:1 resounds over your journey. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Waiting didn't diminish your strength, it honed it. The same way the lion's pause sharpens its leap, your silence sharpened your impact. And when you finally move, the world will feel the shockwave of your breakthrough. History contrasts the destiny of those who chose corruption. Caiaphas, the high priest who plotted against Jesus, sought to protect his own power by silencing truth. Yet his legacy is not honor but infamy, recorded only as the one who handed over the Messiah. Doesn't John 11:50 expose his short-sightedness? You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. He thought his manipulation preserved his place, yet the cross dismantled his authority forever. Isn't it haunting that while Caiaphas's name faded into disgrace, the name of the one he condemned now reigns above every other name? That contrast is your confirmation. Corruption crumbles, but faithfulness ascends. Even science reflects this mystery. In physics, resonance occurs when two frequencies meet and amplify each other's sound. Haven't your trials tuned your soul to heaven's frequency, so that now your very presence carries amplification beyond human explanation, like an orchestra waiting for its conductor's cue? Every note of your endurance is now ready to rise into harmony. And in architecture, we see how unseen foundations uphold cathedrals that tower for generations. Your hidden sacrifices are the same, carrying the weight of something that will stand long after the applause fades. Isn't it awe-inspiring to realize that both science and sacred design confirm the same truth, that unseen forces are always the strongest? and how much more vivid it becomes through ordinary lives. Samuel Ortiz, a bus driver in Bogotá, once shared after 30 years of quiet service. The world ignores the one who gets them safely from point A to point B, but heaven records every mile. When he retired, his community honored him not because he was loud, but because he was faithful. Doesn't his story mirror yours, that faithfulness in silence eventually becomes undeniable recognition? His life reminds us that impact is not always about noise, but about consistency. Not about headlines, but about endurance. Isn't it the same with you? Chosen one, that your life will now be remembered, not for how loud you shouted, but for how steady you walked. What people will feel in your presence is not arrogance, it is resonance, the aftershock of battles fought in secret. The weight of prayers whispered into midnight air. Romans 5:3-4 affirms it. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Your endurance produced character, and your character now carries a fragrance of hope that no one can deny. This is why when you walk into a room, the atmosphere shifts. It is not you seeking validation. It is heaven validating you. And the more you walk in that resonance, the more impossible it becomes for people to dismiss you. So rise now. Stand in the power of the light that never dimmed. Walk with the authority of endurance proven true, with the clarity of a soul that needs no applause to validate its worth. The world will feel it. Heaven has decreed it. And your story is no longer hidden, it is heralded. This is the hour to embody what trials could not erase, and to shine with a brilliance that shadows cannot touch. And when you rise, rise with confidence. For your journey has proven one thing: your light was never fragile, it was indestructible. That kind of atmosphere cannot be manufactured by human hands. It cannot be purchased, staged, or imitated. It can only be forged in fire. And you, chosen one, whether you have fully realized it or not, have been forged, not in the ease of comfort, not in the shallow applause of crowds, but in the furnace of not yet. It was the waiting that shaped you, the silence that strengthened you, the disappointments that purified you. Didn't Malachi 3:3 already reveal this mystery when it declared, "He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, and they will bring offerings in righteousness to the Lord." Your journey was never wasted. It was refinement for the weight you are called to carry. And isn't it striking that what felt like delay was actually God's furnace, preparing a glory that cannot be denied? The long stretch of waiting was not a curse. It was the anvil where your resilience was hammered into strength. In those quiet places where you had every reason to surrender but didn't, a different kind of authority was born in you. You endured not because it was easy, but because heaven's hand held you. Isn't this the same testimony as David's? Before he held the crown, he was hidden in caves, hunted like an animal. Yet Psalm 27:13 captures his heart. "I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." You too carried that same faith in your wilderness. And now that wilderness is bowing to your promise. And is it not true that the most powerful things on earth are always formed in hidden places? Diamonds under pressure, pearls hidden in oysters, rivers carving valleys in silence. Doesn't your story carry that same resonance, that the invisible work of years has now become undeniable evidence of God's hand? Isaiah 48:10 confirms this. "Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tried you in the furnace of affliction. What others mistook as abandonment was God's testing ground, and your endurance has become your testimony. Consider also how art has captured this truth. In Handel's Messiah, the haunting opening movements emerge from near silence. But by the end, the Hallelujah chorus thunders with unstoppable force. Isn't your life echoing the same rhythm that what began in hidden silence is breaking into triumphant sound? The very notes of your suffering are becoming the symphony of your rising. And history warns us through the downfall of those who despised the furnace. King Saul, desperate for applause, rejected obedience. And as 1 Samuel 15:23 records, rebellion is as the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Saul's refusal to endure the furnace of patience cost him his throne, while your willingness to remain has secured your crown. Isn't this contrast a reminder that shortcuts always collapse, but endurance always inherits the promise? Even ordinary lives bear witness. Ana Delgado, a baker from Seville, once said, after years of unnoticed work, "Bread rises slowly, and so do we." For decades she rose before dawn, laboring without applause, until her bakery became the heart of her city. Doesn't her story echo your own, that in the unseen hours, something sacred was rising that only time could reveal? This is why God is making sure your story turns now. Your endurance has reached critical mass, like metal tempered enough to bear unshakable weight. Can you sense how every hidden prayer, every midnight tear, every quiet victory has accumulated into a testimony heaven will not let remain unseen? 2 Corinthians 4:17 declares, "For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison." The weight of glory is now shifting over your life, and no hand can hold it back. So rise, chosen one. The furnace has finished its work. The waiting has written strength into your soul. The affliction has only multiplied your authority. Step boldly now, for this is not just another season, it is your unveiling. What once burned you has built you, and what once delayed you has delivered you. The story turns here, and you are standing in the chapter where heaven's fire becomes your crown. They thought that if they ignored you long enough, the vision within you would shrivel and die. They assumed that neglect would suffocate what heaven had planted. Yet the truth stands unshakable. Nothing authored by God can be erased by human indifference. Doesn't Isaiah 5:5 uns presece declare, "So shall my word be that goes out from my mouth, it shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it." The silence of others could not cancel the sound of God's decree. And isn't it almost poetic that the very ones who dismissed you will now be forced to witness what he has been constructing all along? The same people who misjudged you will see that your story was never dependent on their approval. You don't rise today out of revenge, you rise because heaven has stamped your journey as undeniable. Their disbelief could not uproot your calling. Their absence could not cancel your assignment. Like Joseph's brothers who sold him into slavery, they thought betrayal would bury him. Yet Genesis 50:20 confirms the divine reversal. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. Isn't that the rhythm of your life as well, that every attempt to bury you became the soil for your harvest? Nature preaches this same sermon. The lotus grows in murky waters, but its petals emerge unstained. Have your trials not been the same, producing purity out of polluted environments? And what about volcanic soil formed through destruction? Yet it becomes the richest ground for crops. Hasn't your pain been the same? Transforming into nourishment for the destiny God planted within you. Psalm 126:5 resounds here. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. Every neglected seed is now bursting into undeniable fruit. But history also warns us about the fate of those who tried to suppress divine vision. Nero, the Roman emperor, sought to extinguish the fire of early Christianity with persecution and cruelty. Yet his reign ended in chaos and suicide, while the very faith he tried to crush spread to the ends of the earth. Isn't this a sobering contrast, that those who attempt to silence God's chosen only guarantee their own downfall, while the vision they fight against multiplies? Even art has captured this mystery of resilience. In Victor Hugo's Les Misérables, the relentless pursuit of justice against Jean Valjean could not erase his transformation into mercy and grace. Hugo wrote, "Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise." Doesn't that line echo your story, that neglect could not end what God planted? And now the dawn is unavoidable? And isn't it astonishing how ordinary lives echo this same truth? Clara Nguyen, a school janitor in Melbourne, once shared, "People thought cleaning floors was my end, but I knew it was my beginning." Years later, she founded a non-profit for immigrant families, turning her overlooked years into a platform of restoration. Doesn't her story remind you that what others ignored, heaven always magnified? So, reason now, not to prove your critics wrong, but to prove God faithful, not to demand validation, but to embody fulfillment. The vision inside you is no longer hidden. It is undeniable, unshakable, and unstoppable. You are not stepping into vindication, you are stepping into destiny. And when you rise, rise with the authority of one whose story is no longer a question mark, but an exclamation of God's glory. The very places that once rejected you will soon be confronted with undeniable evidence of why you were set apart. The same halls that shut their doors will have no choice but to echo with your name. The very people who doubted your future will have to stand in the reality of it. And the voices that proclaimed you were finished will be forced to swallow the sight of you rising higher than their predictions ever imagined. Doesn't Psalm 23:5 declare, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." This is not vengeance, it is divine order. This is heaven's courtroom delivering a verdict. A verdict that proves a point no argument can undo. And isn't it powerful to realize that the stage for your vindication is not built by your hands, but by the very one who promised you would stand? Every rejection was secretly building the platform of revelation. Every closed door was laying bricks for your elevation. Because when God invests in someone, He refuses to let the harvest remain hidden forever. Your harvest is not an optional outcome, it is due, stamped in heaven's calendar. For too long you lived as though your life was on pause, waiting for external validation to press play. But what you did not see was that heaven was still writing, still aligning, still setting things in place for a reveal that would only make sense when the timing was perfect. Ecclesiastes 3:11 assures us of this. He has made everything beautiful in its time. The pauses you misinterpreted as silence were actually rehearsals for your unveiling. Isn't it staggering to realize that while others wrote you off, God was still drafting the masterpiece of your destiny, and every second of waiting was heaven fine-tuning the frequency of your life until it resonated with divine timing? Nature itself testifies to this process. The cicada lies hidden underground for years, silent and unseen, before emerging with a song that fills the air. Have your hidden years not been the same, buried in obscurity, only to rise with a sound no one can ignore? Or consider the glacier, moving slowly, reshaping entire landscapes without fanfare. Wasn't your stillness doing the same, carving strength into your character, leaving behind valleys of wisdom and mountains of resilience? Isaiah 61:11 paints the picture perfectly. For as the soil makes the sprout come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise spring up before all nations. Your harvest will not stay buried, it must break forth. And just like the glacier and the cicada, your emergence will alter the environment around you in ways that cannot be reversed. But history gives us a warning through those who tried to resist divine order. Pharaoh, in his arrogance, believed he could oppress God's people forever. Yet Exodus 19:2 records, the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen of all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. Pharaoh's defiance ended in his downfall, while Israel walked into freedom. Isn't it striking that those who once laughed at your wilderness season will see the sea part for you while it swallows their schemes? The lesson is clear. No one can fight against the order heaven has set. And the fate of Pharaoh still shouts across centuries. Those who try to suppress God's chosen only accelerate their own ruin. Even the arts have long carried this truth. In Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, the line, "Though I am not naturally honest, I am sometimes so by chance," reminds us how human schemes stumble, while divine justice orchestrates perfect resolution. Isn't that what your story embodies? That human dishonesty cannot outlast heaven's orchestration, and when heaven writes the conclusion, even centuries of human deceit cannot overturn a single word he has spoken. And doesn't the beauty of ordinary lives testify to? Rosa Mendez, a florist from Buenos Aires, once shared, "I thought pruning killed the plant, but it only made the flowers come back stronger." Years later, her once small shop became a thriving garden that drew visitors from across the city. Doesn't her testimony mirror yours, that what felt like pruning was God's preparation for a blooming season no one can deny? The scissors that cut her branches were the same tools that made space for blossoms in your life too. Every cut has been shaping capacity for overflow. This is the unveiling. Heaven has invested too much in you to let your story remain hidden. The waiting was not wasted, it was alignment. The rejection was not your end, it was redirection. The silence was not neglect, it was preparation. Habakkuk 2:8 assures us, "For still the vision awaits its appointed time, it hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it, it will surely come, it will not delay." And now the vision is unfolding before the world's eyes. The delay has matured into divine drama. The pause has become prophecy fulfilled. So rise, chosen one. Step out of the shadows and into the light prepared for you. Walk with authority into the season where your harvest can no longer be concealed. Stand with courage, for your story is no longer a whisper, it is a proclamation. This is the hour to stand tall, because heaven itself has declared your time. And when you rise, rise knowing that every scar was transformed into a crown, every silence into a song, and every valley into a gateway of glory. And now that timing has arrived, the recognition you are about to walk in will not come through striving or manipulation. It will not flow from exhausting yourself to be noticed or bending into unnatural shapes to earn applause. It will come from the natural gravity of what you have become. Integrity has its own gravitational pull. Resilience carries a density that draws respect without needing to demand it. Obedience creates an atmosphere that presses into a room long before words are spoken. Doesn't Proverbs uns preceche tre remind us? The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them. What you carry now is weight that is felt before it can ever be explained. Like a great cathedral whose stone pillars draw silence the moment you enter, your life now carries sacred architecture that shifts the atmosphere. And isn't it awe-inspiring that what once looked like mere endurance has become divine gravitas? So you should not be startled when people start asking what changed. Because it is not performance, it is presence. Do not be shocked when rooms that once overlooked you suddenly treat you differently. Because it is not charm, it is calling. And do not be unsettled when strangers sense something holy in your life and cannot find words to define it. Because it is not coincidence, it is consecration. Psalm 92 to 12:13 affirms this. The righteous flourish like the palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the house of the Lord. They flourish in the courts of our God. What you carry now is not surface, it is root deep. And isn't it fascinating that the very people who once dismissed you now lean in, not knowing why, but unable to resist the resonance of heaven upon your life? Nature reflects this mystery with precision. The earth feels the shift of an approaching storm before the clouds ever gather. The pressure in the atmosphere testifies to what is coming. So too, your presence carries pressure, holy weight that signals change. Or think of the magnet, invisible yet undeniable, pulling iron toward itself without effort. Isn't your life becoming the same, a magnet of divine order, attracting what belongs to you without you chasing it? Isaiah 60:3 foretells it. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Doesn't this confirm that your rising is not coincidence, but prophecy unfolding? History warns us through those who despised such weight. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, tried to wash his hands of responsibility when faced with Jesus, thinking neutrality would shield him. Yet Matthew 27-24 tells us, so when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood, see to it yourselves. But history remembers him not as innocent, but as the one who bowed to pressure instead of to truth. Isn't it sobering that while Pilate tried to escape weight, you have embraced it, and it will now distinguish your destiny from his disgrace? Even the realm of art has whispered this truth for centuries. In Mozart's Requiem Mass in D minor, the lacrimosa rises with such gravity that listeners often weep without knowing why. Isn't that what your life is becoming, a symphony of weight that moves hearts beyond explanation? What others call coincidence is really God's fingerprint, a melody only heaven could compose. And the testimonies of ordinary lives also confirm it. Elias Fernandez, a fisherman from Cadiz, once said, after decades of unnoticed labor, the sea knows me, even if no one else does. Years later, when storms nearly destroyed his village, it was his quiet knowledge of the waves that saved lives and earned him honor. Isn't his story a mirror of yours, that the weight built in hidden years is now the very force the world will depend on? So don't be surprised when the atmosphere shifts. Chosen one, don't be shaken when recognition rises without effort. because this is not about coincidence, it is about covenant. Your weight is holy, your presence undeniable, your life stamped with the fingerprint of God. And here is the part that may shake you most. You are no longer just carrying light. You have become the vessel through which light breaks chains. Rise with the full assurance that what once felt invisible has now become irresistible. The blessings arriving now are not random favors dropped from the sky, nor fleeting tokens tossed by chance. They are precise responses, divine replies to every seed you planted when it seemed nothing was growing, when the soil of your life looked barren and dry. Each time you chose faith over fear. Each moment you refused to settle for less than what heaven whispered. Each secret hour you carried truth when compromise seemed easier. Those were not wasted gestures. They were seeds sown into eternity. And Galatians 6-9 reminds us, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Isn't this your season of reaping? Proof that God never overlooks seed. Your harvest now is not luck, it is law. A justice written into heaven's design. And isn't it remarkable that what once looked invisible is now undeniable fruit? This is justice. Justice for the nights when you endured without answers, when your pillow absorbed tears that no one else saw. Justice for the sacrifices you offered quietly, the ones no stage applauded, yet heaven recorded. Justice for the pain you carried with dignity, refusing to let bitterness corrode your soul. Psalm 126:6 declares, "He who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him." Every cry was a seed, and now every shout will be a harvest. And doesn't this prove that God wastes nothing, that even your agony became currency in the economy of heaven? Creation itself mirrors this truth. The desert looks lifeless until rain falls. Then suddenly blooms explode from hidden seeds lying dormant beneath the sand. Isn't that your life, that what looked barren was simply waiting for God's timing? Or take the fire-scorched forest, though flames devoured it. Certain pine cones only release their seeds under intense heat. Hasn't your fire season birthed promises that could only emerge under pressure? Isaiah 61:3 confirms it. To grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit. Your ashes were never the end, they were the soil of your beauty. But history also warns us through those who rejected God's justice. King Belshazzar of Babylon mocked what was sacred, feasting with stolen temple vessels as if heaven's order meant nothing. Yet Daniel 5:27 records the chilling verdict. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. That very night his kingdom fell. Isn't this a reminder that while arrogance collapses quickly, patience under pressure always inherits justice? Those who laughed at your sacrifices will watch as the scales of heaven shift visibly in your favor. The arts have long sung this truth as well. In Beethoven's symphony, No. Ooh. The opening notes crash like fate knocking on the door. But by the finale, triumph surges through every measure. Isn't that the sound of your story, that the knocking of hardship has transformed into the anthem of justice fulfilled? What began in minor chords is breaking into a symphony of victory. And doesn't everyday life whisper the same testimony? Mateo Cruz, a farm worker in the Philippines, once said, after years of laboring unseen, "The harvest always comes late, but it always comes." Years later, when floods destroyed neighboring lands, his perseverance in sustainable farming became the blueprint that saved his community. Doesn't his story echo yours, that hidden toil becomes public testimony in God's timing, and when justice arrives, it does not tiptoe, it thunders. It announces itself with the authority of heaven's gavel striking the courtroom of time. But here's the deeper truth. The shift is not only external, it is internal. You have changed. You are not merely receiving blessings, you have become the blessing. You are not just entering a new chapter, you are embodying a new creation. 2 Corinthians 5:17 resounds. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. And isn't it undeniable that because you have shifted inwardly, everything around you must now adjust to the new frequency you carry? So rise. Chosen one, walk in the authority of justice long overdue. Step into the harvest with hands open wide. For heaven itself has declared, your season has come. This is not random. This is not a coincidence. This is the unshakable justice of God, and it is your inheritance. So hear this with clarity, and let it strike your spirit like thunder rolling across the sky. You are not walking into another season of barely surviving. You are stepping into a season of flourishing, of thriving, of becoming undeniable evidence that God never forgets his own. Isn't it written in Isaiah 49:16? Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. That engraving means your name has never left his sight. Not for a second. And maybe, yes, part of you still feels uneasy, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because your history taught you that blessings often carried hidden costs. But isn't it time to admit that the chapter has changed? That the narrative no longer belongs to the old pattern? The very rhythm of heaven is shifting around you, and what feels like survival is turning into overflow. What is unfolding now is not a counterfeit blessing designed to entice and then exhaust you. This is a covenant blessing rooted in eternal promises that cannot be revoked. Covenant blessing does not drain. It sustains. It does not weaken under weight. It strengthens under pressure. Doesn't Deuteronomy 7 gegen 9 assure us? Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. To 1,000 generations. What you are entering is not a fragile favor but a structural blessing, like an arch built by a master architect, able to hold immense weight because every stone has been perfectly placed. And isn't it astonishing that while human approval fluctuates, covenant blessing endures unshaken? Because it was never built on their opinion but on God's eternal word. Psychology teaches us about cognitive dissonance, the unease that arises when reality no longer matches old beliefs. Isn't that what you feel now? As joy stretches your soul beyond the limits of past disappointments, yet this dissonance is holy, because it signals transformation. Romans 12:2 declares, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Your mind is learning to catch up to your new reality. Doesn't that explain why what once felt strange peace without condition, favor without manipulation now rests on you as your true inheritance? Nature confirms it too. Bamboo spends years growing invisible roots before shooting upward almost overnight. Isn't that your story, that unseen seasons prepared you for sudden elevation? Or take the coral reef, tiny organisms building layer upon layer until an entire ecosystem thrives upon their hidden labor. Isn't that what God has been building in you, layer upon layer, foundation upon foundation? Until now, your life can sustain not just yourself, but entire communities who will draw life from your resilience. Psalm 92:14 promises. They still bear fruit in old age. They are ever full of sap and green. This is the flourishing of covenant, blessing, evergreen strength, rooted and renewed. History also bears witness through the downfall of those who traded covenants for counterfeits. Judas Iscariot, intoxicated by silver, thought betrayal could purchase security. But Matthew 27:5 recounts the bitter end, and throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. Isn't that the stark contrast that counterfeit blessings collapse under their own weight, while covenant blessings sustain and multiply across generations? The fate of Judas stands as a caution, while your rising stands as a testimony, and art has long echoed this revelation. In Dante's Paradiso, he wrote, "In his will is our peace." Isn't that the very essence of covenant blessing, that peace is not stolen from you but flows through you because it was built in alignment with heaven's will? Your life now carries this resonance, like a divine frequency vibrating through the atmosphere, shifting everything it touches. Ordinary lives mirror this truth as well. Helena Costa, a seamstress from Porto, once whispered, "Every stitch I sewed in silence was a prayer for my children's future." Years later, her small workshop became a thriving business that clothed not only her family, but her entire neighborhood. Isn't her story proof that covenant blessing multiplies quietly, faithfully, until it bursts into undeniable impact? So rise, chosen one. Step out of the mindset of survival and walk boldly into the architecture of covenant. The season of counterfeit promises is over. What surrounds you now is a blessing built to last, a blessing that carries both weight and witness. Stand tall, because your flourishing is not fragile. It is eternal evidence that heaven never forgets. This season is built upon one unshakable truth: God never forgot you. His remembrance has been the invisible scaffolding holding up your journey, the hidden foundation beneath every step you took in silence. So when the recognition arrives, when the doors swing wide and the light shines where you once stood unseen, do not flinch. Do not let the shadows of old wounds whisper that you are undeserving. Doesn't Isaiah 49:15 remind us? Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne, though she may forget? I will not forget you. The honor that now approaches is not a random accident. It is divine intention unfolding. And isn't it time to stand tall in what heaven already wrote? Instead of shrinking back into unworthiness you have already outgrown. This recognition is not about vanity, it is about vindication. It is the harvest of what you built in silence, the reward of choices made when no audience clapped. Every refusal to compromise when compromise would have been easier was a stone placed in your foundation. Psalm 37:6 declares, "He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun." Isn't that exactly what is happening now, that what was carried in the dark is breaking forth like morning light? And doesn't your own soul feel the weight of that truth, that heaven saw every hidden yes and has chosen this moment to echo them back as visible glory? Think of the resilience you carried when quitting seemed easier, when the burden pressed on you like a storm pressing on a tree. You bent but did not break, like the redwood whose roots intertwine beneath the earth. Your hidden strength held you upright when others collapsed. Isn't this what James 1:12 proclaims? Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. Every silent battle was shaping a crown you didn't know you were earning. And now the atmosphere itself is beginning to shift, sensing the weight of what you carry. History teaches us the same lesson. Joan of Arc, the young French peasant girl, rose from obscurity to lead armies because she refused to bow to fear, declaring that her strength came from God. Though condemned and martyred, her name outlasted kings and councils, and she was later canonized as a saint. Isn't her legacy proof that what is built in secret courage cannot be erased by public opposition? What was carried in the fire becomes immortal testimony. Even art whispers this truth. In the sacred choral masterpiece Stabat Mater by Giovanni Battista Pergolesi, the voices begin in lament but ascend into harmony so radiant that grief becomes glory. Isn't your life playing the same song that what began in sorrow is being rewritten into triumph? The harmony now surrounding you is not borrowed, it is forged from your own tears. Now transformed into music, heaven refuses to silence. And don't ordinary lives testify to? Miguel Alvarez, a bus driver from Madrid, once said, after decades of unnoticed service, "I thought I was invisible, but God was counting every mile I drove in faith." Years later, when a crisis struck his city, his faithfulness was honored publicly, and his small acts of diligence became a story of national inspiration. Isn't that your story as well, that what you carried in obscurity is about to become undeniable evidence of God's remembrance? So rise. Chosen one, do not shrink back. Do not hand victory to the lies of unworthiness. This is your time to stand in what was built with silence, sustained with tears, and carried with relentless faith. The crown has been placed, the season has shifted, and the evidence of God's remembrance is now undeniable. Walk boldly, for your testimony is no longer hidden. It is blazing like the noonday sun, and let them wonder. Chosen one, let them whisper in hushed corners, spinning their theories to make sense of what cannot be explained away. Let them try to reason, to diminish, to wrap human logic around what is divine display, but they will fail. For what God Himself has chosen to showcase, no tongue can silence, no hand can erase, no power can dismantle. Isn't Isaiah 60:22 already declaring this mystery? The least of you will become 1,000, the smallest a mighty nation. I am the Lord, in its time I will do this swiftly. The season you are in now is not subtle, it is swift, undeniable, headline-making. This is where your years of hiddenness, misunderstood by many, are transformed into the very banner of God's glory. And isn't it humbling to realize that your unveiling is not to prove people wrong, but to prove God right? What others called obscurity was heaven's incubation chamber, where character was forged and vision was refined. The silence that felt suffocating has now become your song. Eclesiastes 3:1 affirms, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven." Your time of being hidden was not punishment, it was preparation. Like a seed buried deep in the soil, gathering strength unseen until it bursts forth. Isn't it fascinating that those who thought they buried you will now watch you bloom, realizing too late that they only planted you? Doesn't this shift carry a weight that silences every false narrative without you ever having to say a word? Nature itself testifies to this unveiling. The aurora borealis, hidden from ordinary sight, suddenly lights the skies with colors no artist can duplicate. Isn't your season the same, unpredictable, breathtaking, impossible to ignore? Or think of the cicada, silent underground for years, emerging suddenly with a sound that fills the air. Have your years not mirrored that silence, preparing you for a voice that cannot be drowned out? Psalm 40:2 echoes this. He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. What was once your pit is now becoming your platform. History warns us through those who tried to silence what heaven appointed. Haman, in the book of Esther, plotted to destroy God's people, building gallows for Mordecai. Yet Esther 7:10 records. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Isn't that sobering that the very instruments designed for your downfall become the evidence of your enemy's collapse? And doesn't this show that the headlines written against you are being rewritten by heaven's pen? Even art has proclaimed this truth. In Handel Zadok the priest, written for the coronation of British monarchs, the piece begins with quiet expectation before erupting into a chorus of triumphant declaration, God save the King. Isn't your story unfolding in the same cadence that quiet years are giving way to sudden eruption? And the announcement of God's faithfulness is thundering through your life? And doesn't the testimony of ordinary people bear witness too? Lucia Romero, a teacher from Valencia, once said, after decades of teaching in obscurity, the most invisible years of my life became the roots of my greatest impact. Years later, her students once unnoticed, children rose to national prominence and credited her faithfulness. Isn't that your story too, that what seemed invisible is now undeniable, and what seemed small is now the evidence of eternal greatness? So rise boldly into this season where your hiddenness becomes your headline. Do not shrink back. Do not fear the whispers. The weight of your unveiling is not yours to manufacture. It is God's fingerprint displayed for all to see. Philippiens 5:6 proclaim, He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion on the day of Jesus Christ. The completion is here. The unveiling is now. Step forward with confidence. For your life is no longer a question mark. It is a declaration that God was right about you all along. They said you were done. They said the story was over, that the curtain had fallen, that you would fade into obscurity. But heaven was writing a plot twist that no critic, no enemy, and no circumstance could predict. What looked like the end was simply the middle, and what looked like defeat was God preparing the stage for a revelation. Isn't this the very heartbeat of Romans 8:31? If God is for us, who can be against us? Every whisper of doubt, every false prediction of your downfall is now being drowned out by the thunder of God's vindication. Chosen ones, this is not just about you proving them wrong, it's about God proving himself right through you. From the beginning, he has declared over your life that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Isaiah 54:17. And while weapons were surely formed, while words were thrown like arrows and traps were set with precision, they did not succeed. Instead, the very fire that was meant to consume you refined you into unshakable gold. The very weight that was supposed to crush you has now become the crown that rests on your head. Can you feel the holy reversal happening all around you? Think of Joseph, thrown into a pit by his brothers and forgotten in a prison cell. To them, he was done. To them, his dreams were ridiculous, fragments of youthful pride. But Genesis 50:20 reminds us of Joseph's testimony, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." And in the end, the same brothers who sold him out had to bow before the one they tried to bury. Isn't your journey the same that those who counted you out will be witnesses to what heaven has counted in? And isn't it humbling to know that the victory isn't fueled by revenge but by redemption? You're not rising to gloat over the ashes of your enemies. You're rising because God's hand has lifted you, and His lifting cannot be stopped. You are walking evidence that His promises are yes and amen. 2 Corinthians 1:20. You are living proof that delay does not mean denial, and silence does not mean abandonment. For in the silence, He was shaping. In the delay, He was aligning. In the rejection, He was redirecting. Beloved, your rising is not fragile, it is fortified. Your breakthrough is not shallow, it is sustained. What God has opened, no man can shut, and what He has spoken cannot be revoked. The same voices that declared you were finished will now be forced to admit they spoke too soon. Isn't that the very essence of Psalm 23:5? You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. You don't just survive, you overflow. And so, as we conclude this message, I want you to hear this clearly. It is your time to stand. Do not shrink back. Do not doubt your worth. Do not apologize for the oil God has poured over your life. What you endured in private is now being revealed in public. What you carried in silence is now thundering as testimony, and what others mocked will now be the very thing that draws them to wonder at the faithfulness of God. Before you leave, I want to invite you to become part of this journey with me. If this word has touched your heart, if you felt the weight of confirmation in your spirit today, then take a moment to support this message. Like this video so it reaches others who need to hear that they are not done. Share it with someone who is on the edge of giving up, so they know that God is still writing their story. Comment down below, type 777 as a declaration that you are stepping into this season of divine reversal and unstoppable rising. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next word God is releasing for His chosen ones. To those of you who have supported this channel, whether through super thanks, sharing, or simply being present in this community, thank you from the depths of my heart. Your encouragement fuels this mission. But even if you've never clicked a button, your presence here, your listening, and your openness to receive this word is a gift I cherish deeply. And so I speak this blessing over you now. May the Lord surround you with peace that surpasses understanding. May He crown your efforts with fruitfulness. And may every area of your life that was once called barren burst into bloom. May your household be filled with joy, your path illuminated with clarity, and your spirit strengthened with courage. May your enemies see, not your downfall, but your rising. And may your testimony echo this eternal truth. They said you were done, but God proved them all wrong. Rise now, chosen one. Step boldly into the season prepared for you. Walk without fear, for heaven has already gone before you. And never forget, you are not finished. You are favored.